All right, well, would you like to start us off? We're just gonna go around the table.
Here, have Dave somebody. I'm Dave.
I'm Ben Gordon. I'm from Hillsborough TPM this month.
Tim Morris, DPAC Chair, Citizen here.
Jim Sharp, citizen at large. To be citizen. Mostly civil service.
I'm
Wait,
sorry, excuse me, Chair. Hello, Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
We're getting some feedback online, or at least I am, and I'm not hearing who's in the room.
Okay. If you mind, would you mind muting yourselves?
Everybody looks muted now.
Would you like us to go around again so you can get it for the record?
Yes, please. That sounds much better. Thank you.
Len Watson, the Environmental Protection Commission for Hillsborough County.
How is that? Do you hear us now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
David Saletti, to be citizen at large.
Danny Collins, Hillsborough County Planning Commission.
Ben Gordon, Hillsborough Transportation Planning Organization.
Tim Horst, DPAC Chair, Citizen at Large.
Jim Sharp, citizen at large. Peter Devitt, formerly of Civil Service, now going to be a citizen at large.
Wade Reynolds, TPO staff.
Miller at large.
Kelly Fearon, City of Tampa.
David Aylesworth, citizen at large.
Jonathan Forbes, citizen at large. Chris Fellerhoff, Hillsborough County Community and Infrastructure Planning.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. So are we at the quorum?
We have that.
Okay, so we're just gonna proceed as normal now.
I would like you to call, Chair, since you do have an in-person quorum, please call for a vote of consent for remote participation because you do have remote members online.
Okay. So why don't we go ahead and do that like she said and take a vote. Do we have a second on that?
Okay, I move that we open it up to online participation.
Second.
All right,
All those
all
in
those
favor?
in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all those opposed? Okay, hearing none, motion passes. We will, as Gail said, include them in the decision-making process. So could we go ahead and introduce everybody online as well? Sally, could you go ahead?
We can't hear you, Sally. Gail, would you mind unmuting Sally?
Let me see if I can fix it.
I'm Sally Thompson at large.
Yay.
Yay.
I'm Wanda Vincent at large.
Good evening, everyone. Shedline Apollon, representative from the Florida Department of Health in Hillsborough County.
Good afternoon, Linda Crescentini, Director of Capital Projects, Hart.
Brenton Mosier, University of South Florida.
All right, I believe that's everyone there. Anyone else? See anyone else on screen? So we can go ahead and move on.
So you do have Savannah Vidal. She is on, it looks like on her phone. Savannah, if you'd like to unmute yourself, you can.
Savannah Vidal, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else we need to be aware of?
I think that's it. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. So we can move on to our public comment section now. I don't see anybody here in the room. But is there anybody online for public comment?
We also have Emmett Duran from FDOT District 7 online. Did you want to do public comment, Emmett? If so, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, no, it's just I was muted. I was just wanting to introduce myself. This is Emmett Duran. I apologize. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So hearing no public comment, we can go ahead and move on to members' interests and just open up the floor to discussion on what's going on and what people are engaging in and interested.
I do have one item, which is, I think, interest to the membership. I just want to introduce Ben Gordon, who has been with the TPO since August now, I believe. And Ben is going to be taking up residence as the primary liaison for BPAC. I will still be around, but Ben will be taking over the primary duties for that. So glad to have you.
It's good to be here.
We'll make your life a little help.
That's
All
what
right, just Jim.
Huh? Sure.
So I guess I have one item for discussion that I heard. Heard that the transportation surtax on the ballot got challenged again in the courts. And I heard that the county commission was going to try to come together and see what kind of legal action they could take to, make sure it's all tied in a bow and legal as they like it and such. But I haven't heard any further updates than that. I was wondering if anyone has heard what the status currently is.
It is still on the ballots. A judge did rule that the language was I can't remember the exact terminology, but basically confusing. And so it is going to be on the ballot for the vote, but pending appeal, it may not be ballot even if approved.
And if that's the case, then they're not going to release the results as to whether it was approved or not approved.
No, those should be released, I would
They said, I was at a meeting last night, and they said that it's pending appeal, and if that wasn't straightened out, they would still vote on it because it's on the ballot, and it costs too much money to reprint the ballot. So if that's not resolved, then they said that they weren't going to release the results of whether it got approved or didn't get approved.
That is new information to me.
But I mean, I was in the neighborhood meeting, and the fellow from that all transportation was there.
Mr. Hudson.
I don't know. It was a young guy.
I think the important thing is to tell people to vote.
Yeah.
Because people may hear these kind of things and say, oh, this isn't valid. I won't bother filling it out. So if the appeal is successful, then people need to vote. So that's the message. That's the best we can do is just tell them.
Yeah, it was a shock to me because I heard that news after I had already voted. So I had already read the language, and to me, obviously, being a member here and being surrounded by all that language and that world, it wasn't confusing at all. It was very clear, okay, this is what the tax is, this is what it's going to do, it's going to fund projects. And I think the issue that they had was it said it's going to fund projects in Tampa, West Chase, Plant City, Temple Terrace, Brandon, Carrollwood, all these kind of different Hillsborough area communities. And that's, I believe, the grounds they struck it down on. They how could you say that it's going to go towards specific communities because that isn't really sorted out or all decided. And yeah, I guess to me, I was really disappointed by that. It felt a bit like a political sabotage of why do they bring this up now? Why can't they have brought this up months ago when they were working out the language before the ballots were printed? It seems very common sense that like whoever was working on that ballot language would word it correctly to make it like, you know, bulletproof. And I was really disappointed that it wasn't, and this could potentially set back that initiative another 2 years for the next election. So those are some personal thoughts. I don't know if anyone else has thought or felt the same way, but I just want to kind of air that in the discussion.
My policy is that it's very hard to get somebody to understand something when his salary depends on not understanding it.
So like, do you think that they?
I think that the fix is in, and anytime you try to do something that conflicts with what the Koch brothers want, they'll find a compliant judge to step on it. That's why we need to expand the Supreme Court to at least 13 and double the number of federal judges. Get rid of some of
This
the-
was a state court
No, I mean,
Yeah.
well, oh, by the way,
that did this.
on your ballot, you have the possibility of voting for retention of judges. And on the state Supreme Court, we can't be political, but please seek out information on that, on retention of judges.
So I just know it's like a big issue that like this group has been advocating for and really fighting for. It's on the ballot by the county commission and just wiped out. So not a great feeling, not a great ruling for this group in our initiative for fighting pet safety funding. So does anyone else have any other things they'd like to discuss? Any other members' interests? Anybody online like to comment or bring up anything of interest?
I see Sally may want to. Sally, let me make sure I engage you. Can you?
This is Sally Thompson. I just wanted to say is no matter what you put on the ballot, you can get every lawyer in town, not every lawyer in town, but you can get it vetted and everything. And if somebody wants to sue, they'll sue. So I'm sure go around, they did the best they could, but somebody out there is going to sue to take it off. So that's just the world now, unfortunately. My 2 cents.
Thank you, Sally.
Pardon?
Okay, just after action report, that bike rodeo that we talked about at last meeting, I just wanted to thank Kelly and people from the city of Tampa were very supportive. They showed up late, came. We had a good turnout of represented by the agencies, and we had a great event. Kids got on bikes, kids got helmets, kids got trained in safety. We just had a great time.
Jim
probably had
a change of tire.
Did they give away all?
Every bike,
That's great. That's great.
All right, hearing no other members' interest, we can go ahead and move on to the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chair, I did want to note that Mr. Shirk had one change to that, which we will certainly make, which is for the Plant City Canal Trail to include the connection at the north end to the lower Green Swamp ELAP Preserve.
All right, can we get a motion for approval with that change?
I so move.
Second?
Second?
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Okay, hearing none, the approval of minutes passes. We can go on to the next action item, next section.
Which will actually be, oh, I'm sorry, it's action items. Excuse me, I was thinking status reports. We do not have our airport representative here, so.
Okay, it's a good thing, status report. Okay, the number A. Letter A. All right, so action items, approval of new members. Wade, would you like to introduce to us our?
Yes, Mr. Davitt, who you know, has been our Temple Terrace representative for the last three years. The request is for him to transition to a citizen at large seat. And Mr. Saletti, if you'd like to say a few words about yourself.
Sure. I'm Dave Saletti. I'm a resident of Tampa. I moved from Chicagoland about 4 years ago. And I want to be a part of the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee to help make our streets and communities safer. I'm an avid biker myself. I regularly commute to and from work each day. And I also, although I think the city and county have done a number of things to make our streets safer, that there's still more we can do with the goal of a Vision Zero strategy. So I'm happy to be a part of the committee and do what I can to help with that goal.
How far is your commute?
For me, it's relatively short, so maybe 15 minutes each way.
Are you happy with it? Are you feel safe on it, or?
Some days are better than others. But yeah, I'm very happy with it. Again, having moved from Chicago and being able to commute to work in the winter is definitely a good. And it's good that my office has a fitness center, which I can use the showers and get ready before.
Nice, that's good. Definitely appreciate your enthusiasm and just your commitment to being a part of this committee and advocating for positive change. So,
thank you.
All right, so we make some motions to approve.
I so move. I move that these gentlemen be approved for membership.
Is there any second?
I second. Jonathan Forbes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, hearing none, the motion passes. Welcome, David and Peter.
And just so that the committee knows, it will not be official until you're approved by the TPO board at their December board meeting. They don't have a November board meeting. So welcome, Mr. Sleddy, and welcome back.
All right, so we can move on to the next item being status reports. And we're going to skip, as Wade said, letter A and move on to letter B, Tampa Moves update, coming from the mobility staff at the city of Tampa.
Let me see if I can make you the presenter. We should be good to go. Here, let me go make that. Sorry. You can either do it there or I have your slides up here, whichever is easier.
Thanks, Wade. I'm Kelly Piron with City of Tampa Mobility Department. So I'm going to give you a brief presentation on our Tampa Moves plan, and kind of go over some ways that we're looking to get feedback. Just as an update, we've kind of been doing this plan for about 1.5 years, and we're hoping to wrap it up the end of this year, but we're still accepting public comments. We have an online interactive map, and really now's the time to take a look at what we're proposing and to get your feedback. So for this presentation, oh, there it goes. Just going to go over kind of where are we now, how have we gotten here, the state of transportation in Tampa, what have we heard that everyone wants for Tampa's tomorrow, and what are some options and how are we going to get there. So where are we now? This slide shows all of the existing transportation infrastructure that the mobility department is responsible for maintaining. So we have over 2,200 lane miles, we have 51 bridges, we have 65 school zones, almost 90,000 street signs, 1,000 miles of sidewalk, and you kind of get the picture of just what the whole system looks like. How do we fund this whole infrastructure system? We have a couple different funding sources. On average, our budget is about $11 million a year. Most of that comes from the local option gas tax. Every year we pursue as many grants as we can. Grants also usually require a match. So, we use our $11 million as much as we can to leverage into other grants. We receive a little bit of money from red light cameras, the community investment tax, which is expiring in a few years, and then permit fees and development impact fees. What do we do with that $11 million a year? This shows just some of the different things. We install RFBs, we put out stop signs, we maintain our existing signals and bridges. We are responsible for putting up the cones, so the events at Ray J or just the little live oaks, that's our department that's out there putting those up and setting everything up. To give you an idea of kind of the cost of transportation infrastructure needs, a new signal is about $150,000 these days. We repave about 30 miles of road. That costs us about $4.8 million. And currently we're building 1 mile of sidewalk a year. That's about $800,000. I think that we can all agree that our current funding is not keeping up with basic maintenance. 40% of the roads are either in poor condition or failing condition. We need to replace our seawalls. There are key downtown bridges that have major rehab needs. And I don't know if anyone saw the video from Tampa Police Department where the signal fell during Hurricane Ian on Palm Avenue, but it just fell with the winds. So we all know that there's a variety of problems that are facing Tampa and the transportation network. Does anyone have a guess on what this number 2097 would be? Do you want to guess, Wade?
The next time that'll be repaved?
Yeah, we are currently on a 75-year paving cycle. That means if we repaved this road, the next time we would repave it is in 2097. Tampa roads are unsafe. The city is committed to Vision Zero. On average, though, 44 people die on our roadways every year, and last year that number was 81. I mean, nationwide, it was a trend that increased, but that's really something we consider unacceptable. In Tampa, we waste a lot of time sitting in traffic, about 48 hours on average, and we are growing rapidly. This is the same intersection taken 5 years apart, which it looks like an entire new downtown was completely built overnight. So how did we get here? The last time the federal gas tax was raised was in 1993, which is when Groundhog Day came out. So it feels a little bit sometimes in transportation like we're living through that as well. Over the past years, the power of the federal gas tax has also fallen. Cars are getting more efficient. Maybe people are driving less. There's a lot of different things going into that, but that money really is not increasing and it's going down. So that's just really shown us our old ways of doing things won't work anymore. When Mayor Jane came into office, the first thing that she did was to set Transforming Tampa's Tomorrow, and that included a vision for transportation. As she often likes to say, Tampa's going to change more in the next 10 years than it did in her lifetime so far. Part of that's included adopting Vision Zero and also kicking off the process for the mobility plan, which we call Tampa Moves. As part of Tampa Moves, we did a series of listen first meetings, really went out to the community and asked, what do you want Tampa to look like? What do you want the future to be? And we got a lot of really great feedback. And what we heard was that you want reliable infrastructure. You want more options for getting around. Of the survey that we did, 80% of people wanted to either walk, bike, or use transit more. They just didn't feel comfortable doing so right now. You want a robust transit system. And you want streets to act as places, to have events and have main streets and really feel comfortable walking, biking, and just getting around. You want to have safe streets. We heard very loudly and clearly that you want to walk your kids to school and you want to feel safe doing that. And most importantly, you also want a resilient city. You want equity in decision making and making sure that when decisions are made, that's considered at all levels. So how are we going to get there? So the Tampa Moves plan is a 30-year plan to look at what are our priorities as a city. So this here is our guiding principles. It's got the name Moves, so that's why we named the plan Moves. But really mobility for all, opportunity, vision, equity, and safety is our #1 priority. So what we're going to do is take those guiding principles and apply them to focus areas. These are the focus areas shown on this slide: maintaining our existing assets, filling bike and walk network gaps, creating streets as places, making streets safer for everyone, supporting effective transit, and managing congestion through technology. Really have limited funds and right of way, so we really need to work on making our system resilient and smarter. So Tampa Moves is identified the gaps in the network, whether that's walking, biking, driving, and identifying potential solutions to fill those gaps. And then what we're going to do is use a data-driven approach in order to prioritize those projects using those guiding principles we just talked about kind of as the overarching. We've actually done this for our sidewalk prioritization. This map here, you can kind of see those guiding principles in that darker green, and then the different options that, or the different criteria that we applied. So for example, proximity to transit, located within a community of concern, on a Vision Zero corridor. So we took all this data-driven approach, and we prioritized all the sidewalk gaps that are in the city. And what we found was that in the past, you can kind of see that blue area, those are the lower priority, and that dark red is the highest priority. We've really been using more of a reactive request-based approach. So we overlaid what were some of the requests from the public with our new prioritization tool. And you can kind of see in that top corner, we have not gotten a lot of requests from the public in the Sulphur Springs area. And our data-driven approach is showing us that that is the area of highest need. A lot of transit, a lot of people that rely on transit or walking and biking to get around. So really what we're doing with Tampa Moves is we are being more proactive and not reactive, not just a request-based system. It's really, we're missing the areas that our data is telling us need sidewalks the most. So our Tampa Moves commitment is to listen first and then listen again, really lead with data, distribute our resources equitably, align our resources with our policies, seek funding from every possible source, and we're really just trying to achieve the greatest impact that we can. We taught a couple of town halls, but I want to show this slide just because if you go to our website, tpamoves.org, you can request a presentation if you have a neighborhood association or anyone else that wants to hear about the plan, but there's also an interactive map. One of the maps, you can click here, as we'd love to hear from you, and there is a whole section with interactive maps, including our bicycle and pedestrian network. And that includes kind of the vision of what streets should have what type of bicycle facilities. So should it be a trail separated bike lane? Should it be a buffered bike lane, a shared street? And you can kind of zoom in, get really granular into it. You can click the link as well and leave comments if you think we're missing something, if you think a connection's not there. We are looking for that feedback and looking for that feedback, as soon as possible. So if you have any questions, thanks for your time.
This is Jonathan Forbes. So could we go back to the funding as to where's your sources of funding right now? Because there's a lot of activity, as we all know, we've heard, in high risk, and it's all about funding. $11 million a year strikes me as very low. Yeah, that's my opinion. So outside of local option gas tax, where else does this come?
Our primary source for project funding is local option gas tax. That's what funds 80% of our current projects.
All right. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. In the scooter program that the city has, the original contract was 4 companies, an application fee, a daily charge per scooter on the street. And then I imagine something else on that. That equated, from a rough estimate, I believe, about $1 million a year, just in those fees. Is that included in that?
I think at the time we made this, we were still sort of going through the renewal of the
Yeah, because I
scooter
know the
fees.
renewal's going on.
But yes, that is one.
So that's in there. Okay, so
Yep.
perhaps because this has been a topic of conversation in this committee in the past, is whether or not there needs to be a little bit more enforcement on the accountability with those scooter companies for when they're fished out of the Hillsborough River. Having a simple donation to Sierra Club or some other thing after the fact isn't going to cut it. And I think perhaps the department probably needs to push a little bit harder. I know that's not what we're here for, but there needs to be a little bit more accountability on those companies to keep track of their scooters. And perhaps on a per fine basis, could possibly stack up quite frequently. A lot of money. It helps out your funding issue. Something to think about. Thank you.
What is that? Could you go explain more about the local option gas tax? Like, how much do we charge? Who's in charge of that decision? And then like, how much maybe do other counties around us charge?
Yeah, I mean, I want to stress for the local option gas tax, I think I had a slide.
And then also, I know the city is primarily funded through property taxes, so.
Property taxes do not directly fund transportation.
Okay, so there's no like funding, or there's no discretionary funds when it comes to that sort of thing, or the city's budget?
I don't know if they're, like, it's outside of a primary funding source that we receive as a mobility department. Obviously, the general fund decisions could be up to city leadership, but as a primary source of funding, we receive. For the gas tax, I do want to mention that it is a flat fee. If you pay $2 or you pay $5, we still get the exact same amount. It's not a percentage. So when gas goes up, we do not get more money from it.
And your $11 million budget, does that include like the street sweepers that clean the bike lanes and, or is that different budget?
Yeah, I think that's more kind of personnel, but if we were to buy street sweepers or something like that, but the 11 million is like capital.
And the more we build, the capital spending remains the same.
I mean,
More
one of the
roads, more trails, more
Yes,
things that we
yes.
build. We don't build any more money into our maintenance side of it to maintain.
Yeah, I mean, 80% of our funds come from the gas tax, which is going down. You know, the amount that we're getting is going down, but our purchasing power is going down. Can you imagine if you hadn't had a raise in 30 years and you're paying today's prices? We are repaving our roads at prices that are much higher than they were 30 years ago, and we are not getting more gas tax money in order to keep up with those prices. I mean, we were looking at some projects 10 years ago, and we can't believe what we used to pay for signal compared to what it is now.
So who has the ability to raise the gas tax?
It's a state tax. It is, and I believe there's even an additional local option, gasoline tax up to an additional 5%, if I'm not mistaken, that has not been levied. That would be up to the county commission, I believe.
And just FYI, it's a nationwide problem, obviously, and the trends that are going on, the things that like DOTs are studying, you know, both nationally and at the state level, are road usage charging, right? Because as we electrify vehicles, it's all going to go away, right? So there's a few studies from going on in Portland. They just put some device in a car that measures how many miles it drives. and you pay a tax on that. But we're still, these are kind of small pilots. People think, the government's, even funding, like spending R&D dollars on basic research. How might we solve these kind of problems? But in the meantime, the gap's going to get filled by infrastructure bills and our ability to, those you still have to apply for grants to get them, right? And they require matching funds, so it's not just free. Along with things like the local, transportation tax that may or may not survive.
Yeah, I have to agree. You had a slide there that actually showed why the gas tax is really diminishing, the diminishing return there. Maybe made a lot of points. This is a national issue. So the real question is, you need to replace, what are you going to replace that gas tax? You're going to reprioritize some of the funding that you get through other needs, other areas, or you implement another tax, which is not very popular. So, I mean, that's the broader questions. What are you going to replace your gas tax with? Continue to rely. We would hope that over, we've seen this for many years, point that Peter made, that we're not reinvesting in our infrastructure. We hope we've learned that by now, that we do need to find sources of funding to reinvest in not only the infrastructure, but also the alternatives that agencies and plans like News and Vision Zero use to more liberal communities.
We see David just sold his car. So where's David's gas tax?
I'm part of the problem.
You're part of the problem. Well, I'm just saying that I know people on the channels like that had 2 cars, now they have 1, because they don't need 2 cars. It's that the need for the road didn't go away.
I've owned an EV for the last 4 years, so I haven't bought gas. I'm also contributing to the issues.
When a developer comes through and they propose a development, and they decide to go to city council and they waive the requirement for sidewalks, it's my understanding that they choose to pay money into a sidewalk fund, right?
Yes, they
Is that
pay an
included in
in lieu fee. We called it in this presentation developer impact fees, but yeah, underneath that, if you decide not to build a sidewalk, you can pay an in fee instead. But then there are requirements on how that money is spent. It needs to be within that district. Certain types of, so it couldn't go fund something. It's not.
All right, any other questions or comments for Kelly?
Just one comment for the committee. If you all would like us to bring back some of the, we've looked into the available funding sources and sort of the big picture of what they can provide, whether an increased gas tax or a sales tax or whatever. If the committee would like to hear that again at some point in the future, we're happy to bring it back.
Seems like it generated a lot of discussion, so I think there's some interest there. All right, anybody else? We can go ahead and move on. So anybody else online as well have any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, we can thank you very much, Kelly. Appreciate that presentation, that update. It's very good. And we can move on to item C, Hillsborough County Paved Trail Big Data Survey by Sarah Caper and Chris Fellerhoff, Hillsborough County.
It should be on that one. Let me just make sure you're set up. Do I have to do anything?
No, it should be real. Yeah.
All right. Actually, or we can tap on this for you. Oh, okay, there it is. Thank you.
17 section C.
All right. Good evening, everyone, and if you folks online
have any trouble hearing me, just let me know. My name is Chris Fellerhoff. I work in the Community and Infrastructure Planning Department for Hillsborough County. I'm also a member of this committee. And I'm here to share with you a very high-level overview of a project we recently completed on behalf of my department with some assistance from some consultants that we call our paved trail trip survey. So we did this project basically over the spring and summer months, and what it is it's a big data sourced survey looking at trying to tell us any characteristics about the way people are using paved trails across Hillsborough County. And so what we were able to do through a contract of a data purchase with a big data vendor was look at frequency of use and patterns of use across 17 trails in all areas of the county, which were then divided into 55 total zones. And when I say a big data survey, perhaps you might have heard about these sorts of things before, but there are vendors out there who get access to anonymized data from a variety of sources. This one almost is very heavily favored towards cell phone application location data. So if you turn on location data on your phone with not only with your mapping and GPS functions or other applications where your location is useful to them as they tailor services and advertisements to you, that data kind of gets collected by those app operators, and then it can be resold, hopefully removing some of the information that ties it back to you as an individual, but a lot of patterns about how people move around that can be observed about from that. So a lot of these vendors are now marketing this data to transportation agencies to help kind of study different ways people are using these things. So we looked at some of this data from January to December of 2021, focused in on our trails to see what it could tell us. So as I said, we looked at 17 trails across unincorporated areas of Hillsborough County. And you can see on the map there the green lines. Some of them are quite long. Some of them are quite short. Some of them are sort of independent trails, such as the Upper Tampa Bay Trail or the Flatwoods Park Loop. Others are side paths alongside roads. You can see down in South County that number 15 is a very lengthy side path along US 301. A couple of them in the Fishhawk area, and at least on our screens, see if I can move Sally away. Not just Sally, the whole GoToWebinar viewer. Up here, number 2 up there, that's also within the confines of a gated community, but it is alongside the road there. But we're able to kind of get data from a variety of these places across the county, and like I said, different types of trails to kind of see what's happening out there. And so just see what's, switch back to this screen. What we were able to get, is various types of spatial data. So what these vendors are able to do, drawing a very tight zone around those trails, is say they have algorithmic programming logic that helps them identify what they think to be a bicyclist or a pedestrian, perhaps based mostly on the speed of the traveler and their location within this zone, which we drew tight, but with a small buffer around the trail facilities. They're able to say with varying degrees of kind of certainty and inference that if a person is pinged within that area, they can tell us on a given zone where else on that trail that person came from before being sensed there. That's our origin zone per captured trip. That's on the same trail where the person came from. Then there's a destination zone where the person ended up also on the same trail of the trip. And they're also able to tell us the origin census block of each trip and the destination census block. So if the person started somewhere off the trail, then passed through the trail, and that's where their data point was captured, there's enough information contained in that they can say, well, this person originated this far away and also ended up this far away. And we also are able to get a lot of temporal data of these captured trips. Like I said, we got the whole of 2021 within these 55 zones across the 17 trails. So we're able to look at data across those trails for the entirety of the year. We also got reports and charts that we've already produced that look at the distribution by month across 2021, also across days, the 7 days of the week across 2021, and then also some just kind of more general splits of aggregated sort of prime weekdays, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday versus combined Saturday, Sunday weekend reports in the various maps that were produced out of kind of this largely automated process. So what we've got actually is a bunch of data in some pretty cool but automatically produced maps out of certain queries. There's still a lot that can be done just kind of looking through this. Picking these 55 zones across 17 trails for a variety of conditions across an entire year actually generated in the neighborhood of 5,000 individual maps, which we've got. So we haven't kind of digested all of that, but we've got all this data and we kind of can start to look for trends within it in various ways, and I'll show you some examples of that here. If we take, for example, the Town and Country Greenway, if you're not familiar with it, it's over sort of in the western part of the county in the Town and Country neighborhood. It's situated between Sheldon and George Roads and also between Hillsborough and Waters Avenues. And you can kind of see the map on the right. You see 3 different colors of the trail there in the middle. We chopped it into 3 zones, A, B, and C. So we have data on whenever somebody appeared to be a bicyclist or pedestrian in one of those zones, it generated a data point for us to look at. And I'll just show you like one of the patterns we can kind of infer from that. This is across the entirety of the year 2021, the chart on the right shows the distribution of these trips across the hours of the day. That's a 24-hour stretch there. So on the far left, 0, that's midnight. On the far right, that's 23 is 11 p.m. So you can see at this example, we're looking at zone A, which is the westernmost one. They're in kind of the dark red on the left. You see there's a bit of a spike that starts around 7 or 8 in the morning, kind of tapers off, picks up again in the mid-afternoon, has a bigger peak around 4 o'clock and kind of tapers off with still some activity through the evening. If you then we move to zone B, which is the center one, you can see that that general trend is still there. Some heavy activity in the morning, a decline midday, pick up in the afternoon that's sustained throughout the evening. And then we'll switch over to zone C. You can see that this same pattern gets a little more pronounced with a really pronounced spike at 7 o'clock, a somewhat more pronounced spike around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then still some stuff in the evening. What's kind of interesting, I'm just going to kind of flip through these, back through these. You can see the same general trend, perhaps a little more pronounced on zone C. There is a school right there on zone C, and those hours roughly would coincide to school trips. So one inference we could draw from this, we don't know with any, absolute certainty, but to see this pattern would suggest that these are weekday trips, that people are using this facility at some level to go to and from school because there are peaks in activity that would coincide with school arrival and departure times, and then also that there seems to be some activity more in the evenings than in the afternoons, which would kind of make sense from what our assumptions would be for weekday use. And the next slide, I'm going to keep on zone C, but I'm going to switch you over to the weekend trips, and you'll see the time pattern shifts pretty drastically to a pretty even distribution across the day. So those school time peaks disappear, and we get kind of this spread across the day, which would be consistent with what we would think of a weekend more recreational use than the time critical commute use that we would see during the week. This is one data point looking in common across one of our trails, which only has 3 zones. We look at we can can't get into it here. I chose this one because it's pretty simple. The Upper Tampa Bay Trail, for example, it's so long, we chopped that up into 17 zones. And so we've got, a lot of data to look at that and ways to compare different facilities. But this is just kind of one example of the type of pattern that can be gleaned out of this data that we now have. Another thing it looks at is, like I said before, the census blocks of origin and destination across various time periods. This again is this is bicycles only in the entirety of 2021, and these are the census blocks of origin to the trail. And that kind of lightest tan color is the smallest that you see distributed, but you get a lot of response rate very close to the trail, people ending up at the trail from further out. The weekend, this is weekday trips, the weekend patterns, the most significant trail trips are beginning very close to the trail, but it's showing, pans out to a much wider area and even shows us that some people showed up from as far away as Pasco County to use the trail. So we've got this ability to kind of look at all of the trails in our system, the 17 that I listed. Just some other examples of the distribution. This is both bikes and pets, looking at monthly use across the year for the Town and Country Greenway. Kind of very similar trends of sort of less use in the hot summer months, with better use in the spring and fall. What's kind of interesting is that it seems that the blue bicycle trips actually have their peak in September, whereas the red pedestrian trips have their peak in March. Don't know what that means. It's just kind of something we can observe off of this. And this is also the distribution then we can also spread across the week. So this is Town and Country bike and pet use Sunday through Saturday, or Monday through Sunday, as the chart has. Share of use. We have a bike peak on Wednesday, lesser use on Saturday and Sunday from what it's telling us on the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, or I'm sorry, the Town and Country Greenway. So, like I said, we've got that kind of data for all our trails across all the months. So there's a lot we can do to look at it. The lessons learned from this are that, it was able to give us this huge trove of data looking across our entire trail network for a year. When we started this project, we kind of just went into it saying we'd like some information on how many people are using the trails and whether we can say that they are commuting or for recreation purposes. And in the past, we've done online surveys, which we tend to get responses from people who are well connected to the committees and other groups and advocacy groups that would hear about an online survey, and it's really dependent on kind of your networking of how you spread the word about the survey. We thought about doing an intercept survey, but the labor cost of stopping people on the trail, your response rate of getting people to stop, and you're limited to a very short window of a few days and a few certain hours that you go there. This data gave us visibility across the entire trail network, 24 hours a day for the full year. So much higher visibility for counts or surveys. It allows us to do pretty cool comparative analysis between trails or looking at trails across different time periods. I haven't said a lot about kind of the absolute precision of the data. There's still a lot of, like we say, estimation on the part of the data vendor with proprietary algorithms that kind of take, well, we actually observed one person whose phone pinged here, and we are going to extrapolate that out by a process that's proprietary to say they represent this many users. We're less certain of kind of its absolute value for that level of precision, but I think for the various comparisons between the trails, it gives us a lot of direction for interesting questions to kind of pursue, perhaps with a more observational approach on certain areas. And the sheer volume of data, like I said, is a great opportunity. The challenges also are the sheer volume of data. Like I said, just our basic inputs of saying we want bikes and peds, by day of week across the year, across these 57 zones, generated 5,000 maps. And so to even kind of wade through that, and that's just kind of saying, well, this will be an automated cut on what it is, and assume an analysis can be observed out of this. We can go in and analyze it in a million other different ways if we want as well. Also, in some of, like I said, some of the values that we get out of it are the products of proprietary algorithms. So we don't, for example, with this particular vendor, know what the raw data is, how many people they saw, exactly how they judge them to be a bicyclist or pedestrian. We assume that speed and origin of the trip and length of the trip have something to do with it. They don't share with us the exact detail of those algorithmic programming. So there's a lot of kind of trust we have to put into it. So like I said, the real value, I think, is it gives us ideas of areas to focus for more observational and direct investigation, and also kind of provides us some really high-level comparison of use between facilities. So with that, I'll take your questions.
So will this data be used to promote or encourage enhancements?
Encourage what?
Enhancements to the bike fit?
I'm not sure directly what we will, I mean, it's going to allow us to look at different facilities and see sort of which ones are popular, when they're using, make some inferences that we can perhaps back up with some observational data to say that this trail is very popular. It could help defend maintenance of a trail that perhaps we weren't thinking was very popular. It could help us look for ways to expand. It's got a lot of potential use. We haven't yet decided on any one direct application. It's just giving us more insight into the users of our trails, and which could inform a lot of decisions. Yes.
Got a question for you. Do you have like a top 5 most popular trails, or you have a list like that? I feel like that would kind of be useful to determine what the demand is.
We need to do, I certainly looked at that high level number, and I chose not to put that in this presentation because one of the things we found is that some of our side paths appear to be getting a lot more use than I suspected they would be. So we want to do a little more playing with the data to see if we can kind of figure that out. For example, like the one on US 301 or the one on Brandon Boulevard registered very high. I would like to field validate that. Go out there in times where it said that they were seeing lots of people out there and see if we can replicate that. I have a hypothesis that if that is true, that's really cool, because I think that, again, I think we have kind of a bias towards trails. We think that people will like them. I think we, as planners, tend to overlook non-choice trips and kind of not see people who are out. You know, if you get 3 bikes an hour down a suburban side path, that adds up over time. And, you know, a lot of people say, I never see anyone out there. Well, you're one car driving down that road. So it would be exciting to sit there in places that we see that and find that the use is greater. I also kind of have the sneaking suspicion that to be sure we captured everything, you know, we drew these zones. Well, that will include people who might have just crossed the path. It doesn't necessarily only, you know, it doesn't weed out people who travel longitudinally along the path. So for example, when we were looking at the initial data for the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, the area down by Alonzo High School down there at the south, huge spike of pedestrian activity, but those people weren't bleeding out. They weren't showing to have ended up on other parts of the trail. Well, that makes me think that perhaps somewhere during the day, a lot of high school students or parents sitting in their car in the car line, which is close enough to the trail to be perhaps, you know, noisy on the edge of our buffer and sitting there not moving quickly, might be showing up as pedestrians because they're not moving fast. And there were enough of those that I want to spend more time with each individual trail. Like I said, it's a ton of data. I want to, before we kind of really push that out, but the Upper Tampa Bay Trail was popular in that initial ranking. It wasn't. And we all think that's kind of the jewel of our system right now. It wasn't leaps and bounds more popular than the others from the raw data, and we were kind of surprised by that. And I want to spend a little more time, again, kind of knowing the things that we don't know definitively, look for ways that we could validate it before we do that. But this is showing registering a lot of hits on those things. If somebody's stuck in traffic, if 301 is moving very, very slowly and you're in the outside lane, is the 5-foot buffer that we put around the trail to be safe going to capture somebody sitting in their car, moving slowly as a bike or a pet? I don't know. But those were kind of some of the ideas we bounced around when we saw, boy, there's a lot more people on these side tests than we imagined there would, because the common perception of those, and I hear it all the time, nobody's out there on those things. Their side tests are terrible. People don't use them well. There's still people getting around, and I know that they don't always look like, the users we are trained to look for in some ways. They're not the families out there, enjoying the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, and they may have much shorter trips, things like that.
Commenting on, you said Brandon Boulevard was one. Is that the path along the Selma Expressway where that dumps off?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's another place. Could that just be a congestion? I haven't had time to kind of dive in and say, oh my gosh, that's really peaking at 3 to 5 or 4 to 6 or something like that. But that was another one to say.
I used to drive that commute and a couple times a day, and like I'd always see people out there like and yeah, my family's out there as well, and they kind of know it. And what we thought is that there's no place in Brandon for all those people to go and walk like a measurable distance without being on an unsafe street or a hot sidewalk or something. So like that's kind of like a destination where you'll see people drive to it, park their car, and then walk the path back and forth, and then like drive back. So that's a little anecdotal for you.
Yeah, I mean, but that one is kind of completely off my radar. I'm like, it's short, it's kind of isolated. I assume it probably doesn't get much. But then it also, personally, I'm not in that part of town at peak times. I kind of also think, well, as people come off the Selma and then they wait for the light at the end there could be times where the street is like a parking lot, and they're moving slow enough that they could be mistaken for a bike or a ped if the zones were not tight enough. I don't know. And that's what things we kind of want to investigate now. But this has given us a lot of questions we want to follow up on. So, yes, Jim.
Back to the Town and Country Trail. Segment B there, in addition to the school that you identified in segment C, there's an elementary school in segment B, right toward the west end of segment B, where Webb Road crosses the canal there.
Right.
There's an elementary school there that's probably also part of that. When you map these, could you put the attractors on there as well? That might explain that.
Yeah, and on these maps we did have, you can see the symbols for the schools. They are on the maps that we already have generated. We have parks and schools and bike lanes. I don't have the full legend of that, but our standard one does at least call out parks and schools and bike lanes and other trails.
Okay.
So, but yeah, that's.
You got the school up there.
Yeah. And I mean, that was kind of, again, I'm making inferences. That pattern sort of, it feels a little more pronounced to me on the two ends than on the middle. I don't know when I look at them different, but the middle is distinctly different. It's got a lot more streets leading, almost, connecting to it that people could wander out to the trail. I don't know the exact, accessibility of the trail out there, but then you have the schools on either end. But definitely across all of them, it seems like the times are really tied to schools, and then suggests that there's evening use as well. And I thought that really smooth distribution across the day on the weekend was pretty interesting as well, which seems to at least bear out that the pattern is different on weekdays.
Yes, thanks, Chris. Given that it doesn't sound like you know how you're going to use the data, was the goal of the project to become familiar with these types of data and the types of things they're useful for so that you can apply to future projects?
Yeah, it kind of came that way. It started out with, well, we want to be able to say something about volumes and commuters versus recreational. And in the past, the only data point we had on that, and I was asked to maybe replicate, was an online survey that went out through the committees and through the various advocacy groups in the community saying, hey, do you use Hillsborough County trails? How do you use them? Well, I looked at that data and we got like 700-800 responses, but a bunch of them were, hundreds of them came in from people who identified as members of the Swamp Mountain Bike Club because they're a well-organized group and their members respond when they ask them to respond something. Hundreds of them also from, I think it was, Run Tampa Bay, Debbie's group. Again, kudos to them for getting their people out. But then it was all kind of concentrated on that, and then we got kind of the minimal responses outside of that. And then also the answers were, we love the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, close the gap, all that kind of stuff, which again are messages that we often hear, and they're not invalid messages, but they're very focused, and they're the results of things. So I kind of thought, well, it's not going to tell us something we kind of don't know already. And so we just kind of, we put a proposal out there to, various of the consultants who are already on contract saying, look, we want to do something to help us when we come to the TPO for some money, say, well, this trail or our trails in general are used for transportation versus recreation, or are used at this level, help us get some information other. And some, we had ideas to do intercept surveys and ask people, are you recreating? Are you commuting? How often do you do that? But then we looked at the limitations of that on a budget. A number of times you could get out there. If you didn't choose the right hour, you could be completely out of luck on getting any useful data. And so a couple of our consultants came to us with versions of a big data study. And so we decided to do this one just to see what it could reveal. And I think it gives us stories to tell, in support of our trails and how they're being used. And it gives us insight into things we might study further. As kind of a coincidence, we also, our department over the summer, we got a few queries, and then we kind of reached out to some more. There are a number of these vendors of big data now out there, each presenting different ways to look at it. And so we got about 5 or 6 sort of lunch and learn presentations pitching how their products are used, and we were doing this study in parallel. So that was kind of really interesting to kind of be up to our elbows in the product of this vendor, and then also looking at the way the others described theirs. Like some of them would offer the raw counts of how many actual devices they pinged in an area when you looked at that, whereas the others say, no, we give you the product of our proprietary process. Some of them are selling a subscription service where you pay a certain amount a month, and you can go in and query the data all kinds of different ways, one query at a time, whereas the others, like this one that we use, you can order up, a batch for a certain amount of money per zone, and you do it, and they give you, and you tell them what time period you want. They dump all the data on you, and then somebody's got to process it, which our consultant did a worthy job of doing. But it was so kind of overwhelming too to say, well, we can generate 5,000 maps across this many zones, just looking at 6 or 8, variations of a slice of this. So yeah, I think the big result was it gives us stories to tell, but I think it also was dipping our toe into the pool of what this data can do, and kind of knowing, what we might, if we were to use it again in the future, what it might be good for.
We hear about camera counts that your group does, TPO does. His data might lead you to places where you could put your cameras because there's questions about the who and the what.
I was thinking about that, and it doesn't look like we're going to have access to the cameras, but we will in the future have access to tubes and infrared detectors through FDOT District 7. FDOT Central Office is ending their county program, but passing all the equipment down to the districts to have those available. So for trail facilities, on road, we do need the cameras, but for trail facilities, it would be a good way to validate some of that in future counts.
Yeah, I haven't done it yet, but I want to look at, I know we did both in the spring and fall of this year, the Upper Tampa Bay Trail was one of the locations in the 2 count, and I assume you probably have some data on there from 2021 as well. When it was done previously.
Yes, it was done.
But I'd love to kind of pull those days out of this data and see how close they got, because, it is, it's a product of some interpretation, and it'd be curious to see, in that time span, how close these are, and that could, and, the data vendors are all like, oh, if you have counts, give it back to us, and that'll help us calibrate our data, calibrate our algorithms. So like, well, I'm looking to you for information. I'm not looking to just be a source for you to sell my information to someone. Whoever uses it, but they were eager to go, oh, you have counts? Give it to us, we'll calibrate it. And I should use my count calibrated.
You might just refer them to the statewide map, because it's all out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we do want their data to get better.
Yeah.
Like that.
But I'm kind of curious to see.
Ask him to give you a discount if you validate their data.
I mean, a big part of the future of intersection, both, vehicle detection and safety is going to be real-time video processing systems exist today. Unfortunately, those cameras aren't on the trails. They're trying to measure. They're at intersections, but that's still going to be huge. That's going to be very reliable. And it's very effective today. It's of course cost. It's going to take years to upgrade our infrastructure, but those sources will be available, and eventually, I think, at a cost that we can put them on trails. And they have safety benefits too.
So, I mean, if anybody's curious about, we're going to have this data, and it's a lot to go through, and it takes time, so we kind of have to pick our battles of where we want to dive into it. It was an interesting exercise, and it's a resource now we have to.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments for Chris?
All right. Do I have to do anything up here?
No, that's all right.
Thank you very much for that presentation. Okay, so
Connor McDonald is next. I just made him the presenter, so there we go.
okay, great. He's going to be presenting on the multimodal level service reports. Connor, you have the floor if you can hear us.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So Connor McDonald, TPO staff. Good evening. I'm here to present on the multimodal level of service report, a status update on that. So I'll begin, let's see the next slide. The purpose of the report is to record and produce a comprehensive list of major roadways and their multimodal operating conditions. So the major roadways come from our TPO roadway network, which is defined by federal documentation. Just a little background, and many of you are familiar, but just a refresher. Level of service was a concept developed for vehicles as a measure of inconvenience or delay. So these images from Virginia DOT, you can see the LOSA is minimal traffic congestion, and then LOSF would be pretty heavy traffic congestion. And a little later on, research then explored new methods to qualify safety and comfort for bicyclists and pedestrians using level of traffic stress. So an LTS1, as you can see in this image, is comfortable for all ages and abilities. An example would be a separated bicycle track. And then an LTS4 would be, more uncomfortable for most. So no bike or pedestrian facilities on a major roadway. So a brief project history related to this. In 2017, we evaluated existing MMLOS methodology and established a level of traffic stress standard. And then earlier this year, you may remember Wade presenting on we used a finder gradient of existing conditions for bicycle and pedestrian level of service. And we applied this to all roads within the county. This summer, we incorporated those two methodologies into the database for pedestrian and bicyclists, and we reviewed and updated the transit level of service calculation as well. So coming soon, we'll have a report for the roadways in the TPO network, as I mentioned before. And the upcoming report will use the corresponding jurisdictions level of service guidelines for vehicle level of service. So that would be unincorporated Hills Road County Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code, and then the same for City of Tampa, Plant City, and Temple Terrace. And then we'll also use our guidelines that include LTS as part of the methodology for bicycle and pedestrian level of service, and then the level of service we developed this summer for transit. So we will be coming back with an action item to approve the report, but it will be available soon, and it will be published at planthillsroad.org/level of service report. And that concludes my very brief presentation, and I'm here for any comments or discussion or questions.
Does anyone have any questions or comments? I guess, Connor, I got a question. When, you might have said it, but when will you be coming back with the completed report?
Good question. We did have that question earlier today at Livable Roadways Committee. I'm hoping that we'll get the report to the January board meeting. So maybe December or January we'll be coming to the committees.
Okay. And it'll be for all of Hillsborough County?
Yes, so it's all roadways in our network. So the jurisdictions that own roadways in our network are Hillsborough County, City of Tampa, FDOT, the Expressway Authority, the Turnpike with the Veterans Expressway, and Plant City. There are no Temple Terrace owned roadways in the TPO network at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Wait,
Absolutely, thank you.
Does this use the same database for the MPO has?
Yes. And the updated bicycle and pedestrian level of service stuff that we worked on earlier this year that you all saw and we worked with Chris's team on as part of this. The only thing I might add to Connor's very thorough information is transit level of service. Basically, it's the number of buses per hour on a given segment. So if you have two routes that overlap, that might double the number of buses per hour on that particular segment. And you can access more places because you have multiple routes. But that's the only one we haven't gone over in detail. Vehicle volume is just volume and the capacity. So, okay.
All right, does anyone online have any comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, we can go ahead and move on. So thank you very much, Connor. We look forward to the updated presentation whenever that's ready for us.
Okay, thank you.
And then, let's see, do we need to go over any of these items in the addendum?
I just have a couple of quick announcements. One is next Wednesday is the Tri-County meeting. I sent out an invitation to everybody today. Pasco County is hosting, so it's a bit of a drive, but Tina has proposed a ride at 4:30 p.m. Tina Russo, that is our Pasco County counterpart. And so a ride from 4:30 to 5:30, and then the meeting up there in Pasco County. I have the location on the calendar item. A quick note about the Tampa Bypass Canal meeting, which was last weekend. The addendum here has a link to their public input page. They've done a great job on the PD&E for that project. Most of the crossings of major roadways happen at either below them or above them, so grade separated crossings along the canal. There are, I believe, 2 locations where that was not possible in the PD&E. One is at Orient Road and Adamo Drive, so you have to get across Adamo at grade, and the other one is Martin Luther King Boulevard, which is immediately on the south side of the fairgrounds, where Martin Luther King goes on the south side of the fairgrounds. You have to make that crossing at grade there, but it's a great project. It's not cheap. The total cost all in is about $40 million. The price has gone up significantly since we did the initial feasibility study, I believe, 7 years ago. And that does include design and other costs, and really has it pretty well broken out. Yes, that's all I have.
Old business item. You might recall last year we had a couple of discussions about the proposal of a U.S. bike route number 15 that would come in on State Road 39 and kind of clip the northeast corner of the county, coming in from Pasco and then going out to Polk, going through the middle of Plant City very quickly. I did a lot of research and development on a report to the various arms of the county that would need to approve that back in last winter. But then Pasco County for a while was very resistant to the route that was coming through the county. So we kind of suspended our review of that until we knew that what route we were actually going to receive incoming from Pasco. And I guess last month their VPAC finally did agree that for the limited cohort that is a long distance bicycle tourist, that route was workable. Wouldn't be their preferred sort of family route through the county, but it'll work for long distance tourists. So I just this week, I've kind of blown the dust off that report I worked on, and we're going to have some internal meetings to figure out exactly who in the county we need to sign off or review this recommendation. So hopefully in the next month or so, we'll be coming back with kind of a position on the part of the maintaining agencies in the county. Some of it are DOT roads, some of it are city roads also. But hopefully we'll be back and invite the VPAC to also endorse it, but we want to make sure that all the operators are good with it as well. But it was on hold for a while, and it's now been revived. Now that it's been approved by Pasco. And Polk has approved theirs as well, so we know what dots we need to connect.
We talked about that at the thing this summer.
That's right, at the last tri-county.
Is Robin from Plant City on?
No, she is not. And Josh Blackman is actually replacing her as the representative. He couldn't make it tonight, but I know Chris will coordinate with him.
Okay. All right, does anybody else have anything to add? If not, we can go ahead and pass a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Do we have a second? Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you. Thanks,
You know what? We're gonna get next year.
Okay.
We found out about it. I get some TV show.
Yeah, I just wanted to. So it won't be the next meeting, or will be?